Hello and welcome to the Literary Lair and to the second week of sequel month. Sometimes writers create books and never envision a sequel. One such author is Michael Crichton, who had never written a sequel to any of his novels until Jurassic Park. While I won't minimize Crichton's other novels, though I haven't read them, I'm sure that they're great, Jurassic Park is his big novel. The one that everyone remembers, which is in part due to the smashing success that Steven Spielberg's adaptation had. And following Jurassic Park, pressure from both fans and, I presume, Universal Pictures, because I know they wanted a sequel too, Crichton started work on a sequel that would become The Lost World. But he had a bit of a problem. He killed the breakout character. While obviously Alan Grant was the protagonist of Jurassic Park, when the movie came out, everyone gravitated to a different character. Hallelujah. 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 Ian Malcolm, mathematician, teacher of chaos theory, and a man who wore all black to a tropical island and somehow didn't die of heat stroke. And in the first book, while it's fairly vague, he doesn't make it off the island at the end. It's one of the many alterations that the film makes to the story, in addition to the changes of killing Gennaro and saving Hammond and Wong, making Gennaro a secondary antagonist with him being the seedy lawyer, while in the book he's actually really nice, etc. Crichton said it himself, he needed Malcolm, but not any of the others because Malcolm is an ironic commentator. And hey, if Sherlock Holmes can go off a waterfall and come back later, why not Ian Malcolm? Anyway, like last time, it's time for a recap. Previously on Jurassic Park. John Hammond creates an amusement park designed around genetically engineering dinosaur DNA from ember-trapped mosquitoes to create Jurassic Park on the island of Isla Nublar. During a test weekend in which Hammond invited several dinosaur experts like Doctors Grant and Sattler and mathematician Ian Malcolm, along with his grandchildren Tim and Lex and his lawyer Donald Gennaro, to explore the park and give it their stamp of approval. But a shady competitor, Louis Dodgson, manages to convince computer programmer Dennis Negri to steal dinosaur embryos for a large sum of money, so Negri shuts off all the electronics, which causes mass chaos as the entire park falls apart as dinosaurs escape and attack the endorsement team. In the end, only Grant, Sattler, Gennaro, Tim, Lex, and the game warden Muldoon survive, while Hammond, geneticist Wu, and allegedly Malcolm are either killed by dinosaurs or die as a result of their injuries, with InGen being in a lot of trouble. So let's take a trip to Isla Sorna and see if The Lost World lives up to the brilliance of the first novel, and if it was worth it to bring back Ian Malcolm. The cover is a dinosaur silhouette. The first one was a skeleton and this one is a dinosaur. And since I'm reading from a collected edition, it doesn't really matter, so let's get right to the story. The book has several plot lines that converge into a larger story. The first plot line concerns Dr. Ian Malcolm, who, after recovering from his injuries at the end of the first book, becomes a professor and teaches chaos theory, along with developing a friendship with Sarah Harding, an animal behavior expert. The two of them also share a mild dislike of Dr. Richard Levine, a rich, pompous paleontologist who is interested in finding a so-called lost world, where dinosaurs survived from the extinction event into the modern day. Which is a preposterous idea. There's no way anything survived Sledge's meteorites. He wants Malcolm's help, but Malcolm tells him that his theories aren't good, which could be seen as dickish behavior, but just think. He's probably not even allowed to think about dinosaurs, considering how many NDAs InGen had him sign once he recovered. Levine also has two young proteges, Kelly and Arby, two 7th graders that Levine met because he teaches middle school as court-ordered community service. It is useful, though, because Levine also knows that he's being followed by a private investigator, so he uses the kids to throw the PI off his scent. Levine is planning an expedition to the so-called Lost World, which is on an island near Costa Rica, where, in the area, several strange reptilian corpses are washing up on shore. Only they don't correspond to anything alive today, and the government seems to want to cover it up, which only makes Levine more interested. Eventually, Malcolm is won over by curiosity and agrees to help Levine. Only Levine goes missing just a day after he took a trip to Costa Rica to scout one of the bodies that washed up, taking a sample and sending it to Malcolm before he went off the grid. Kelly and Arby, noticing that their teacher was absent, head over to Dr. Thorne's, Dr. Thorne being a retired professor and the guy who was supplying Levine with all the tech for his expedition, along with his assistant Eddie. They go over to Levine's house to check it out, finding Levine's computer filled with research about a Site B and stuff about InGen, while they get a radio transmission which, while faint, seems to indicate that Levine is in trouble. Thorne rushes into action, calling Malcolm and Harding so they can mount a rescue. The kids want to come with, but Thorne tells them to stay put because it might not be safe. And if you think that they're going to listen to Thorne, you're wrong. Meanwhile, someone else is planning an expedition to Isla Sorna. Someone familiar to fans of the first film and the first book. Lewis Dodgson.
Dodgson! We've got Dodgson here!
Yes, that one. After his failure to secure the dinosaur embryos from Negri, cause Negri kinda sorta died and doomed the entire park, Dodgson has been researching everyone involved with InGen and Jurassic Park. Finding that Grant and Sattler are alright, though not romantically involved, Gennaro died on a business trip, but not the business trip to Jurassic Park, and Malcolm is still Malcolm. Dodgson has been watching Levine and has similar plans to go to Isla Sorna, but not for research. Why steal dinosaur embryos when he can steal dinosaur eggs? Thorne, Malcolm, and Eddie land on Sorna and begin their research and are not too happy to discover that Kelly and Arby tagged along, while Harding, who arrived late, hitches a ride to the island with Malcolm's old friend, Lewis Dodgson, who pushes Harding overboard when he finds out that she didn't tell anyone where she was going. Malcolm, Thorne, Eddie, and the kids have to find Levine, stop Dodgson from causing chaos, and make it back to the landing site in order for their return vessel to arrive. Harding survives and makes it to shore, while they find Levine, who doesn't want to be rescued. He's having a blast. That radio message? He doesn't know how the damn radio works, so they didn't get his entire spiel. They set up camp and a high-up base camp to observe the ground with, since they have time to kill before they're picked back up, and Thorne and Malcolm do some digging into InGen Site B stuff. Dodgson starts stealing dinosaur eggs using a sonic frequency generator to ward off the adult dinos, ignoring the fact that the parents are going to be mighty annoyed that he's stealing their babies once he turns the machine off, as the group finds Harding, with her revealing Dodgson's presence to them, to which Malcolm, Harding, and Eddie go off to investigate. Dodgson steals a T-Rex egg, and on the way out, him and his men injure one of the babies, which Harding and Malcolm discover when they investigate. They tell Eddie to shoot it, since it's gonna die anyway, and that's the humane thing to do. And Eddie proceeds to take the baby back to camp so that they can fix its leg. Listen, I'm all for saving animals and stuff, but you're on Dinosaur Murder Island. You gotta have your priorities straight, and bringing a baby T-Rex to your base camp is not smart. The parents, however, don't notice at first, since they're too busy chasing off Dodgson when the machine's power cord comes out. Harding and Malcolm attempt to fix the leg, while Thorne, Eddie, and Levine take the kids to a safe spot so they won't be hurt in the event something goes wrong. Then something goes wrong. Night falls and the velociraptors show up and kill Dodgson's partner, because obviously we need velociraptors in this book, because they are objectively the best dinosaur. And I will fight you on that. The baby T-Rex calls for its parents, who then begin attacking the trailer, knocking half of it off a cliff and injuring Malcolm, requiring Harding to scramble to save his ass. The raptors attack the hide, killing Eddie, and when Arby rushes for cover in a dino-proof cage, well, let's just say that people in cages and Spielberg-related properties always end up in trouble. As Harding tries to fix Malcolm's injuries, which involves doping him up with copious amounts of morphine, Wick sidelines him for the rest of the novel as he rambles on about chaos theory and extinction, while everyone else tries to find a way to make it back to the helicopter landing site so they can get the hell out of there. Thorne goes out to find either fuel or another vehicle to use to get back, running into dinos with chameleon-like properties, but comes back empty-handed. On the way in, though, Harding saw a usable vehicle and takes the motorcycle out to find it, only to find that Dodgson had the same idea. Dinosaurs begin to converge on the vehicle, and the two of them take refuge under the vehicle. Harding pushes Dodgson out, where the T-Rex finds him and scoops him up into their mouth, carrying him back to the nest, where the children play with him and maim him before eating him. Which, for Harding, is the darkest thing she could do. But, considering that Dodgson attempted to murder her, and directly led to the deaths of Eddie and his two assistants, in addition to essentially engineering all the deaths in the first book, I'm gonna let this one slide. She makes it to the helicopter landing site just as the chopper takes off, but thanks to some snooping, Kelly figures out that there's a usable boat in one of the sheds, and the survivors, Malcolm, Harding, Thorne, Kelly, and Arby, make it off the island, as Malcolm ruminates on some information he gleaned during their earlier investigation. All the dinosaurs are basically doomed because of a mistake InGen made in the labs, feeding the young carnivores sheep extract, which causes a mad cow-like disease to affect all of the animals on the island, meaning that the Lost World will eventually have an extinction event of its own pretty soon. I guess life doesn't always, find a way. We'll be right back with more of the show. And did you know that not only has the Jurassic Park franchise been revived recently, but another Michael Crichton property has become wildly popular in recent years? I'll tell you which one when we get back. We're back, and Westworld, the wildly popular HBO series, is based on a film from the 1970s written by none other than Michael Crichton. Man, that guy really has an affinity for theme parks where chaos happens, huh? Like in the first book, Malcolm takes a passive role. In fact, he takes the exact same passive role where he gets injured halfway through and spends the rest of the book stoned off his gourd. I mean, I get it because Crichton wanted to do the same thing with Malcolm in this book that he did in the first book, but I was hoping that we'd get more of Malcolm being part of the action in this one, considering that Crichton frickin' raised him from the dead to be in this. It's not that I don't like the diverse cast of characters that we get, it's just that I really like Ian Malcolm. Speaking of the other characters, Richard Levine is awesome, and the fact that he was cut from the movie is a disappointment. He's a jackass, but you know what? He's a fun jackass. He's passionate about his theories, and he's not a money-grubbing industrialist. He's a real scientist. One who knows jack about field work, but he's still pretty cool. He's never rude to the kids, and while he was definitely using them to throw off the PI, the worst thing he does is not want to leave the island because he doesn't want to miss all the awesome research there is to do. I honestly think that the Lost World movie would have been improved tenfold if Levine was in it. Thorne is a good character too. He's smart, but he never acts like a jerk to the kids or to anyone else. He's framed as this insanely tough college professor, but he's a decent person, and to his credit, when he finds out that Levine is missing and in trouble, he springs into action to track him down. He's also fairly competent and puts himself in the line of fire as he tries to ensure that they make it off the island. Sarah Harding is amazing as well. She's a kick-ass, has her own agency, sorta Ellen Ripley-like character. She gets the bulk of the action, getting to ride a sweet-ass motorcycle and saves everyone, including Malcolm, more than once. There's not really much to say other than Sarah Harding is awesome. Arby and Kelly don't feel like annoying kids. I mean, they don't do all that much in the grand scheme, apart from helping a little bit, like Tim and Lex. And Arby being taken by the Raptors. We get some good backstory for them, like how they're from totally different worlds, but are still friends, Arby being well off, and Kelly having a neglectful mother. And I applaud Crichton for making them both useful. Unlike how Lex was sort of useless and Tim got all the dinosaur and computer knowledge. Kelly and Arby both help out at different parts, and neither of them feel useless. And like the first one, we get a character who dies that we really liked and wanting to survive. I was really rooting for Eddie to survive, considering that it was a stupid decision to bring the T-Rex back, but it was one made out of compassion and sympathy rather than greed and malice. And he died for it. All of the other deaths felt justified, apart from Levine's guide who got killed, but other than that, it was all Biosyn guys, so I was okay with it. On that same note, I like that the villain is someone we know, Dodgson, instead of someone new like Ludlow in the film. It's a lot stronger considering that we know Dodgson is evil from the start and is going to cause trouble. Plus, it saves time because we don't need to waste time establishing Dodgson. The readers already know what he's all about. And it makes his death even sweeter, because while in the book Hammond was partially to blame for being a greedy jackass, and Nedry does get killed by the Dilophosaurus, getting to see Dodgson get killed by a T-Rex is very cathartic. All in all, we get a great cast of characters, just like the first one, and a very interesting world to set them in. The action is very well paced, and the book never feels too slow for me. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. Unlike the first one, it's not bogged down with exposition about the genetics and InGen's history, so the story zooms, and we don't have to meander around with hinting at dinosaurs before we get to the park. We start right off with Malcolm and Levine, and it's a pretty straight shot to Site B. The book is 430 pages, but it never feels plotting. Every page is important, and Crichton really knows how to use every piece of the available medium to create a great story. The book really flows brilliantly, which is why it's such a shame that the film adaptation was so bad. While the first film benefited from changing a bunch of the story, I feel like The Lost World would have benefited from rigidly following the source material. The book's action is so precise that it's almost tailor-made to be a blockbuster, and the screenwriter just ignored it. This book is a movie told in 430 pages. It feels like a movie, the visualization is like a movie, and yet most of this doesn't even make it into the film adaptation. All of the characters get the pages devoted to them that's necessary, and it doesn't feel like any character is pushed into the background or sidelined except Malcolm, but based on my research, that was Crichton's intention for the novel. According to a quote on his website, it's a very difficult structural problem because it has to be the same but different. If it's really the same, then it's the same, and if it's really different, then it's not a sequel, so it's in some funny intermediate territory. While I disagree with that, since I think sequels can be different from the original and still be a sequel, I can't hold Malcolm's sidelining against the book. Honestly, I've rambled on about this, but I can basically sum up the action by saying, it's a blockbuster in written form. The Lost World is utterly brilliant and a must-read for not only fans of Jurassic Park and Michael Crichton, but it also works as a standalone because you don't really need the backstory of the original to enjoy all the new stuff, though it certainly helps. It really does make me mad that they didn't follow it word for word in the film adaptation, because it's such a great sequel, and considering that Crichton had never written a sequel before, that's amazing that his first one was such a hit. Sure, I disagree with him on what a sequel is, but I can't deny that he wrote what is possibly the best book sequel I've ever read. Definitely one of the best that we've done on this show. Probably shouldn't have scheduled this as the second book of the month, but here we are. We can only go down from here. If you're a fan of Jurassic Park and have never read this, rectify that. If you're a fan of the original film but hated the original sequels, then read this. It'll clean the bad taste out of your mouth. And Crichton goes out of his way to mesh this book's story with the film's ending by killing Gennaro between novels and bringing back Malcolm, so you'll be able to follow it without having read the first book. But you should anyway, because it's a classic. And that was The Lost World. Was it good? It was almost better than the first book. I still love the first book, don't get me wrong, and part of my love for it is my love for the 1993 film adaptation, but Crichton managed to create a worthy successor to the legacy of the first one. It's only a shame that Spielberg couldn't do the same for the film series. Though who knows, maybe getting Jeff Goldblum back will turn the franchise around. All in all, the novel was great, and it had everything it needed to be a rousing success. Great characters, an interesting setting, and a brilliant villain that really deserves all he gets in the end. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of the Literary Lair, you can hit that subscribe button. And if you have any comments or complaints about the video, you can put those in the comment section below. Oh, and if you want to be notified of new uploads, you can hit that bell icon. And if you enjoyed this video, show it to your friends and share it around the internet. And maybe consider supporting the show on Patreon. See you next time when we hit our 149th episode and go back to an old Christmas tradition. For this show, at least. The name is Gleason. Michael Gleason. Hello and welcome. No.